Are you uncomfortable with things that don't make sense? When someone tells you they've seen a UFO, or better yet, a ghost, does your mind race to explain it away? Maybe you say, there must be a scientific explanation. Or perhaps, it's a spirit trapped in time trying to reach us. Or maybe you think there's an answer out there, but no one, not even scientists or ghost hunters, has found it yet. Well, it's that time of the year. The nights are getting longer, the shadows a little deeper, and the old stories have a way of walking out of the past. I'm Liam, a retired historian, and tonight I'm going to tell you a story based on something that happened to me in 1993. It's a story tied to a real tragedy, one that took place 1,000 years ago. Two young Viking princes died on that land, and some say they never really left. I'll offer a historian's perspective. You decide what you believe. The leafless trees stood like dark sentinels against a pewter sky, their trunks weeping clear meltwater that slid down the bark like wax from unlit candles. The wind came hard off the fens in long, low gusts that felt less like weather and more like warning. It pressed against my coat, rattled the hedgerows, and filled the gaps between the outbuildings with a mournful howl. We were on holiday, invited to stay at Bodsey House in the lowlands northwest of Cambridge, England. At its heart, the house was nearly 1,000 years old, a remnant of Canute the Great's royal hunting lodge, built when England still trembled at the sound of longships. A generation later, William the Conqueror would claim the crown from Canute's line at Hastings. But here, the old Viking king still seemed close, his presence written in timber and stone. I'd been looking forward to this stop on our European tour for months. The thought of walking the same ground that once held a royal court thrilled the historian in me. But after we arrived, no one else wanted to face the cold. The fire burned warmly, the food and drink were comforting, and even my adventurous children surrendered to the hearth. Our host offered to walk with me in the morning, but patience is not among my scholarly virtues. I pulled on my coat and stepped out alone. He had told me to walk north past the farm outbuildings where a wartime bunker stood on a low knoll overlooking the open fens. The wind met me head on, sharp as knives. To the west, a line of bare trees marked the toll road, shielding the lodge from the steady stream of traffic headed toward the old bridge. The house itself broke the tree line like a stone in a stream, its west wall nearly flush with the road. To my right, pens and sheds hemmed me in with dark, silent shapes. Forward was the only way, but a scrap of cloth caught in the wind and wrapped itself around my ankles like a snare. As I struggled to free myself, I lifted my head and froze. 3 figures were walking away from me. I saw no faces, no hands. All 3 were cloaked, the taller in a dusty black robe, the 2 smaller in what looked like soft animal skins. The adults' arms draped protectively around their shoulders. The image was brief, blurred by wind and distance, but it left me cold. Then, as if the gust itself had swallowed them, they rounded the corner of the outbuilding and were gone. I ran, But when I turned the corner, there was nothing but the knoll and the bunker ahead, wind-scoured and empty. They must have gone inside. I don't recall deciding to follow, but suddenly I was stepping into the damp hush of the bunker. It smelled of cold earth. Pale light seeped through the narrow slits. The air pressed against me, but the place was empty. I searched again, scanning the yard, the horizon. Nothing. It was as if the figures had never existed. The cold I felt then was not of the wind. It was of something older, quieter, and harder to name. As I walked back toward the house, I reminded myself that this had once been Canute's processionary home. He had no fixed palace. His court moved with him, a mobile assertion of power. The current house had been built around the remains of that 11th century lodge. To the northwest lay Whittlesey Mere, once the largest lowland lake in England. 3 miles long, 2 miles wide, and prone to flooding. The Victorians, determined to tame it, drained it in 1851. The lodge endured because it stood on what would once have been an island, strategic for a king, perfect for a hunt. The most famous story about Canute tells of him commanding the tide to halt, a story often read as arrogance, but meant, I believe, as an act of devotion, a reminder that only God is sovereign. But the second most famous story about Canute belongs here. According to Cambridgeshire Folktales by Maureen James, written in 2014, Canute built a hunting lodge at Bodsey, near Ramsey, which he could reach by crossing Whittlesey Mere. It was said that Canute's twin sons would travel across the mere on their way to school at Peterborough Abbey. One day, while the sons and their servants were sailing over the mere, a sudden and turbulent storm arose, surrounding them on all sides and leaving them in utter despair. By the clemency of God, some survived the furious waves, but others, according to divine judgment, were permitted to pass from this life. After the storm subsided and Canute realized his sons had perished, he ordered his soldiers and servants to mark out a ditch in the marshes between Ramsey and Whittlesey with their swords. Workmen and laborers later cleared the way, creating what became known as the King's Delph, or Canute's Dyke. The enduring power of his story was reinforced in February 1913, when excavations at a monastic cemetery in Peterborough unearthed 2 tiny 11th century coffins. At first, they were thought to contain Canute's sons, but the remains were those of infants, too small to match the age of boys attending the Abbey school. By the 20th century, belief shifted back to an older local tradition. The princes were said to lay beneath the flagstones of Bodsey Lodge's central hall. And tonight, my family and I would be dining there. The historian in me usually swats away such tales, but the image of the cloaked figures clung to me like mist on a window pane, resolved to say nothing, yet. Upstairs in our room overlooking the toll road, Precious, my wife, was fastening her earring when I returned. Her expression was taut. "Where are the kids?" I asked. "They're downstairs already," she said, laughing about dining on the graves of Viking princes. I laughed softly. "Well, It is quite a thought. 1,000-year-old building. She gave me a look that cut through the levity. Only the dining room is that old, she said. The rest grew around it piece by piece. I caught the unease in her voice. What's wrong? I asked. She hesitated. I don't know. The whole idea of eating over the graves of those little boys creeps me out. And she glanced toward the door. And what? And what? After a long moment, she said quietly, twice on the way to the bath, I felt like someone shoved me, hard, like being shouldered aside. Not a cramp, then, I said. She forced a laugh. The floors are uneven. I must have slipped. But she hadn't slipped. We both knew it. I mumbled, someone's come to play. What? She asked sharply. What are you saying? Oh, nothing, I lied. Let's go to dinner. The hallway outside our room was dim and uneven, the floorboards flexing slightly with each step. Behind the walls, the wind sighed as if the house itself was breathing. The dining room was warm with firelight, but our children were unnervingly silent. Hope and Jessie sat perfectly still at the table, their eyes fixed on the shadows beyond the hearth. Hey, guys, I said. How long have you been here? Shh, Dad, Hope whispered. She's never told me. Shush in her life, I thought. Jessie added, he's gone, Hope. Dad scared him away, Hope muttered. We want to find him. No, Precious said firmly, you're not wandering around this house alone. Their bickering felt strangely thin against the air of the room, as if the house itself were listening. Finally, I asked, Hope, who's gone? She turned toward me. The little boys. We heard them crying. We couldn't see them. Yeah, Jessie added, but that light thing swung back and forth like a monkey was on it. Liam, Precious snapped. But I had no words. A moment later, our hosts and friends entered. I leaned toward the children and hissed, keep this to yourselves. Our host, a slight balding man with twinkling blue eyes, set a plate of rolls and honey on the table. I'll do as you say, Liam, he said with a grin. But what do you want me to do? I burned red. Oh, nothing. He chuckled. I imagine you've met one of our ghosts. So you know about them? I blurted. Know about them? I live here. He tapped the flagstones beneath the table. 2 Viking princes, Canute's twin sons. They're not always around, but they like children their own age. His wife then swept in with food. Candles flickered, though no draft moved. Oh, come on, he said with a laugh. You don't believe in ghosts, do you? No, I replied automatically. Neither do I, he said softly. But I do believe in the supernatural world, just as C.S. Lewis did. The fire popped, and the flagstones seemed to hold their breath. The house settled into its nocturnal breathing. All 4 of us felt the hallway bully that night. An unseen shove, a brush in the dark. Precious and I lay awake, uneasy. The children perversely giggled as they made unnecessary bathroom trips as though it were a carnival ride. Then the crash came. Our door slammed open, striking the wall. Precious stirred, whispering, "No, no, no!" Instead of ghosts, it was Doug and Carrie, pale and wild-eyed, our friends who had accompanied us. "Don't you knock," I barked. Take it easy, old man," Doug hissed, hands raised. "We're losing it." Carrie's voice trembled. The lights in our room kept coming on after we turned them off. We unplugged the lamp. It still came on. "Enough," Doug said. "We had to get out." I told them the local story of the ghost lights over the drained mirror, lights seen long before there was electricity. They stared at me, the weight of that detail I received from our host hanging heavy in the cold air. But they went back to their room with sleeping masks provided by Precious. I wished them luck. At 4 a.m, I awoke, certain I would not sleep again. Precious was gone. The children's beds were untouched. Doug and Carrie's room glowed faintly from beneath the door, lights flickering again, on and off. When I pushed the door open, the lamps blinked out. The beds were perfectly made. The room was empty. The house was awake, and we were not alone. Later, in a dream or something worse, I found myself alone downstairs. The host's quarters were empty. The kitchen was silent. I stood before the dining room door, paralyzed by indecision, aware that the answer lay beyond it. I pushed the brass plate and stepped inside. The fire roared in the massive medieval hearth, but the room was freezing. On the far wall stood the 3 cloaked figures, an adult and 2 children, apparently, faces turned away. My voice betrayed my fear. "What have you done with my family?" A high, steely voice answered, "The children need playmates. They will stay with us." "And the others?" "We will deal with them as we see fit. The king is not pleased. This is his domain." I tried to steady my voice. "One question. Why do ghosts from the 11th century speak modern English?" The temperature surged. Though I saw no faces, I felt their displeasure, like heat against my skin. "You have talked too much," the voice hissed. "Step toward the fire." I felt myself lifted, toes scraping the flagstones, dragged toward the flames. Heat clawed at my skin, my eyes burned, the fire filled my vision, and nothing. Blackness. "Liam, wake up!" Her hand on my shoulder, light filtering through the curtains. Precious face, concerned, alive. The children laughing in the doorway. Doug and Carrie packing. For a heartbeat, the world tilted between 2 realities. "Well," I muttered, "just like Hollywood. All a dream, I guess." "No, Liam," Precious said. "The lights. That part happened. They had to change rooms." The children confirmed the rest, the crying, the voices, the swinging light. The figures in the farmyard? That was mine alone. And I mentioned nothing. We left Bodsey House with the winter sun low over the fields. its light thin and cold. The wind had quieted, but the house stood there, watching, just as it had for centuries. I didn't look back often. Once was enough. And now an afterword. As a historian, I know how to separate documented fact from folklore. But Bodsey Lodge defied easy sorting. Its very geography is layered with centuries. Canute's Court, medieval hunting parties, the drained lake, the prince's graves beneath the flagstones. 19th and 20th century eyewitness reports, like my own, speak less about ghosts than about the memory of a landscape, a belief shaped by weather and water, kings and grief, that what once happened here never entirely left. Whether the figures I saw were tricks of the fen wind or something older, they carried the weight of centuries. Places like this are not haunted by individuals. They are haunted by time itself. If you enjoy stories like this, please like this video. And while you're at it, why not comment? Do you have a ghost story? Do you wonder if I'm really telling the truth? Maybe you should subscribe to this channel